I would like to acknowledge that this video is being filmed on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander or First Nations people who may be watching this video today. Hi everyone, my name is Steph. This is the Novelty Corner. If you haven't met Benny already, he's here today. My parents took pity on me after my booster shot, which I've not felt particularly well today after having it yesterday. So Benny is here to keep me company while they've gone out to see my sister and do some things in the city. I hope my makeup tastes tasty, Benny. Anyway, Benny's here with me, so I thought he could help me film this video, which is going to be super low-key and very chilled out because I do not have the greatest energy levels today, but I still wanted to film this just because I'm not quite sure whether I'm actually going to get worse later on, and just having this filmed means that at least I can edit it at some point. So, reality, state of the world, and yeah, we're going to talk about some books. Alright, so this is my reading wrap up from the 22nd until the 28th of January. I read a total of 16 things this week. It was the last week of the holidays and I was basically mainlining books all week. Those 16 books equated to 3,324 pages and my yearly reading total is 51 books. Please zoom out. Yeah, there you go. There's Benny. Hanging out on the bed behind me. Alright, so I'm going to start off with two sort of all-age graphic novels. They are both by Kay O'Neill. You guys will have heard me talk about them recently. They are some more of her graphic novels. So there is one called Dewdrop, which is very much like a children's graphic novel, but anyone can enjoy it. It's about friendship and about friends who feel like they're not good enough for things and they're entering into competitions. And then Dewdrop, the axolotl, comes along and is nothing but encouraging to their friends, and it is just gorgeous and glorious, like all of Kay O'Neill's books. And then there is Aquicorn Cove by Kay O'Neill. This one is a little bit longer, probably intended for slightly older audiences, but again, sort of middle grade and up, you can read it. And even if the kids are a little bit younger, if they read it with an adult, it's great. It's all about environmental stability. Our main character is Lana. She has returned sort of to her hometown where she hasn't been for a while, and she's there with her aunt, and this small town is a fishing town, and yet they haven't really been looking at their sustainability practices for a while. So together that sort of comes to a head when there's a huge storm and there is, you know, a community of creatures living below the surface of the water who have ties to the town, and they really need to address what's happening with the fishing in the town and the relationships that everyone has, and it's just gorgeous. Alright, moving into the other titles that I read this week. The first one that I read was Against the Wall by Cate C. This is Stonecut County book number 2. I have not read book number 1, but I really liked the premise of this particular story. It is a contemporary romance between Glenna and Cash, and they were childhood friends. Glenna was in fact best friends with Cash's twin sister, and then something happened to sort of create a rift between Glenna and Dina, and so suddenly what Glenna notices is that all the time Cash is just teasing and bullying her throughout high school, and so she cuts off ties with all of them. This one really plays on the enemies to lovers trope as well as fake dating, which is really fun in combination, and you have the best friend's sibling romance trope. Honestly, I just really enjoyed this, and I will try and go and read some of the books that take place with characters that we meet in this book. Some of them are tied into the MC series that she has. Some of them are tied into other books, but I really enjoyed this, and I actually quite liked Cash as a hero as well. Then I read the next two books in the Necessary Evils series by Onley James. So that's book 2, which is Psycho, and book 3, which is Moonstruck. Psycho is the story of August Mulvaney, who is one of the children who has been identified as a psychopath and raised by a billionaire. And he currently works as a professor, and he has an eidetic memory. And one day his path crosses with Lucas Blackwell, who is a former FBI criminologist whose colleagues believe has kind of lost his mind a little bit, because it turns out that Lucas is a psychometric, so he can touch objects and he can see and feel things attached to them. Basically, they put him on administrative stress leave type thing. So anyway, Lucas is now working as a professor at the same college as August, and their paths cross, and of course, Lucas figures out pretty quickly exactly who and what August is. And this one was honestly a delight, as they have to learn to trust one another and of course try and find a way to resolve the situation of the FBI agent who is also a serial killer. So I'm really loving this series, and I really liked this second book. I think I like the second book more than I like the first book. And then in Moonstruck, we follow the oldest of the Mulvaney brothers, Atticus, who has a really tough time relating to his brothers in general and other people, and they constantly give him grief for it because he's constantly trying to be the oldest sibling and to do no wrong by their father figure. He is not particularly fond of killing, and he is also a very skilled mimic, so a lot of his behaviours he mimics from people around them. So he makes people feel at ease because he can mimic exactly the sort of body language and conversational structure that they need to feel safe. And yet he is very insecure and uncertain himself. When he's not mimicking other people, he comes across as very blunt or very cold or very removed. And it's his relationship with a man called Jericho, who is a little bit like a Peter Pan character in that he has a group of teen boys and young men who work for him in their sort of auto shop, and they are trying to keep track of street crimes and then going after the perpetrators. And then of course Atticus gets involved in that as well. Again, I really enjoyed this one. I'm liking that we're getting to develop the characters. We do find out about another relationship in this particular book that I'm very excited to see play out at some point. I hope we get that book at some point because I really, really want to see it. I also read a novella called Worship by Jack Harben. This one was recommended to me by Brie from In Love and Words. This one is super short. It is a contemporary romance between Spencer and Edin. They are going back to their 10th high school reunion, and Spencer is really reluctant to go, and when she's there she comes face to face with her former fiance, I think it was, and his new fiance, who happens to be sort of the mean girl from high school, and things happen. And then Edin, who always sort of had this crush on Spencer, comes and helps her, and then they have a very, very steamy moment in the showers, quite literally. And yeah, it's just very short. Totally get the awkwardness of high school reunions. I have not gone to very many of mine, but yeah, this one is short, it's steamy, and really fun time. Jack Harben's got a great writing style. Then I read the first 3 books in Jessica Gadziella's Golden Glades Henchmen MC series. So this is another offshoot of the Henchmen series. This one takes place in Florida, I believe, and the first book is Huck, then you have Chace, and then you have McCoy. My favourite of all 3 of them was Chace. Huck really follows the new leader of the Golden Glades Henchmen. He ends up in a relationship with the woman who moves in next door to them, and we find out that she has quite a few phobias and a lot of trauma in her life. She does not like driving. She gets really panicked in a car, and she wants to live as far away from other people as she possibly can. She's a gamer. She live streams gaming, and she just wants a place of her own. And what she doesn't expect when moving in next door to a motorcycle club is that they're constantly going to be partying, and there's going to be a lot of loud noises at all hours of the day, which makes it really hard for her to film. And eventually there's a situation where she comes face to face with Huck, and he thinks it's strange that this single woman is living all by herself next to a motorcycle club. I mean, they have no designs on her or hurting her, but they just think it's all weird. And eventually she comes around to saying no, can she have a couple of hours where there's no music, no loud noises, so that she can continue her livelihood. That's all good. And then there is one of the dogs from next door, because one of the MC members likes to collect animals. The dog comes over into her property, so she has to return it, and there she gets to meet more of the characters, and she gets caught up in quite a few situations while she's there, which require her to have some protection from the club. And as it turns out, the club, because it's new, is having to do a lot of setup work and is still constantly defending itself against other groups and gangs within the same territory. Meanwhile, Harmon, the heroine, also has her own issues and someone that is stalking her. So lots of things going on. Really fun. Chace I really liked because it featured a marriage of convenience and a second chance romance. Chace is one of the members of the Henchmen, and then a woman called Saskia comes up to the club and introduces herself as Chace's wife, who none of them have ever heard about. And as it turns out, they knew each other many years before. They were street racing together, and in order to stop Chace from being deported, Saskia offered to marry him. So it was marriage in name only, and they had a good thing going, and then they went their separate ways, and now Saskia needs Chace's help, and so it gives them the opportunity for the second chance romance. McCoy was probably my least favourite of the 3 books in this particular branch of the series. Not that it wasn't good, I just didn't enjoy it as much as some of the others. This one is obviously about McCoy, who is one of the members of the MC, and his relationship with a woman called Shy. She comes into the club and she has a gun, and she has been blackmailed into going in there and killing one of the members of the club because someone has kidnapped her brother, I believe, and threatened to kill him if she doesn't do this. She ends up shooting McCoy. It's not a spoiler, it happens straight off in the book. Then they find out exactly what is going on. This one I found had a few more triggers, not necessarily for me, but perhaps for other people, including kidnapping of both Shy's brother as well as kidnapping of a child, and there's also mention of sexual assault in this book as well. After those three, I did read one more Jessica Gaziella book, and that was Cary, which is the most recent release in the Henchmen Next Gen series, and I've liked Cary as a character in previous books in the series. It's book 5. He is a little bit older than most of the other members of the current MC, and this one is a bit of an age gap. I'm not entirely certain. I couldn't figure out what the age gap was, but I do know that the heroine is a little bit younger. So it's a bit of an age gap sort of story. You have Abigail, who had previously lived in a very cult-like setting with her family. When her marriage fell through, she was kind of blamed for it not succeeding. And so she decided to go to South America and to work as a missionary. And then she ends up sort of being the kept woman of a drug cartel leader. And she doesn't realize this at the time. And sometime between all of those events happening, she had been writing to prison inmates as part of sort of a community outreach program trying to convert them. And one of those people happened to be Cary. So they had formed this relationship through letters exchanged prior to the beginning of this book. In her present situation, she figures out a way to escape from the cartel and to get back into the States, and she tries to track down Cary because she knew he was a member of an MC group and thinks he might have connections to help her disappear so that no one will ever find her. And of course, when they first meet, Cary doesn't know who she is because they've never met in person, but then he finds out what she's been through and he decides that he's going to help her, and so he sets her up with a place to stay and with clothes and food and all those sorts of things, and they really begin to develop an attraction to one another, and Cary is very, very protective of her. So I really enjoyed this one, mostly because I really liked Cary as a character and it was nice to see his story, so there was that investment already. After that, I finished my reread of The Nightmare by Regine Abel. This is for Bree's Travelling Books thing on Discord for her members. So I annotated this one. It is a monster romance in the paranormal romance genre. It is the second book in the Mist series, and we follow Naima, who is recruited because she happens to have a very powerful nightmare that manifested as a result of her childhood trauma. So this is a world where there is sort of a breach between our world and the world where nightmares and walkers and things come from. And there is a government agency that is trying to harness some of these to work for them because other mistwalkers and nightmares have gone rogue and are causing havoc out in the world. And so they need to recruit like creatures in order to help them. And Zane happens to be one of the most powerful nightmares out there, and I love him. This is very much a morality chain story because he will burn down the world for her. I also read a short story called Captured by the Prince by Emma Castle. This one is only about 20 pages long. It is an MMF romance between a prince, his bodyguard, and the princess that he was betrothed to. It sort of sounded a little bit like the premise of Theirs for the Night by Katie Robert. Because it was so short, I didn't feel quite as invested in the story, but if you wanted something short and steamy to read, this would probably work for you. It also has a preview for another one of her books, so it says that it's 80 pages long, but the actual short story is only about 20. I also finally picked up Edin, which is the second book in the Monstrous series by Lily Mayne. I really loved Soul Eater when I read it the first time, and so I wanted to continue the series, so I'm just going to try and do that over the next couple of weeks. Edin is one of the monsters that has come through the portal into the human world, and he is kind of the cinnamon roll of the monsters. He is huge and purple and has horns and a tail, and he's good friends with the Soul Eater. He has no intention of hurting humans, and he ends up saving a human called Hunter, who is a soldier but has managed to fall into a sinkhole when his best friend has been kidnapped by some other monsters and Hunter's trying to save him. And so Edin saves him and then agrees to help Hunter track down the monsters that took his friend. This is very much a road trip story without the car. They're constantly traveling and they're having to get to know each other and understand their differences. Hunter has a prosthetic left leg, I believe. Quite often it's mentioned that all this traveling through the desert causes him great discomfort. So we get a lot of that authentic mention of how he copes with his physical disability while doing what he does best. And then you have this very slow burn relationship between Edin and Hunter, and, you know, overcoming some of the prejudices, because Edin doesn't realize at the time that Hunter is a soldier, and there has been quite a few run-ins between the monsters and soldiers in the past. There's also some gladiator fights that happen towards the second half of the book as well, so there's lots going on and it's really fun. I also read Match with the Demon by Chace Verity. This is their most recent release in sort of, I'm calling them the domestic demons books, because they're novellas, they're short, they're sweet, they feature really domestic sort of situations between demons and humans. This is the first book we have sort of in this series, and it was honestly just glorious, because you have a single dad whose son has left and gone off to college and is only just starting to get back into the dating game, and so his son suggests that he goes on an app, and he ends up setting up a date with this, you know, big, blonde, gorgeous looking guy, and he gets to the bar, and what he sees is this creature that is covered in tentacles. And at first he thinks that someone's playing a joke on him and that they're dressed up and whatever, and that he's being catfished. And as it turns out, he just happens to be the person who can see what this demon looks like. And as he gets to know the demon, who's called Laszlo, they begin to actually develop a strong friendship, and they enjoy spending time in each other's company. And it was just so cute, and just a nice palate cleanser to read something that was sweet and adorable and just a little bit weird. And then the final book that I read this week was Something Fabulous by Alexis Hall, which is his most recent release. And this is a historical romance, and gosh, it was funny. I was buddy reading this with Brie, and some of our conversations and our takeaways from the book, I was just cackling while reading this book. It was so fun and so good. So this is about Valentin, who is the Duke of Melbourne, and at the beginning of the book he is proposing marriage to a young woman called Belle, and their fathers, when they'd both been alive, had previously discussed the idea of them marrying and, you know, combining the families and cementing that alliance. Meanwhile, Belle is very put out by this, puts her foot down, absolutely refuses, and runs away. Now, Valentin is the grumpiest of grumps. He's not very politically inclined in terms of conversation, so he just states things as facts, and he has this idea of what being a duke is, and he's never considered anything else. And then when Belle runs away, Bonnie, Belle's twin brother, comes to see him and says, no, we are going to go after her together, we are going to get her back, and you are going to fix this problem. And we learn very quickly that Bonnie likes men and that he is very attracted to Valentin, but Valentin is very, very clueless. Like, he's never even, like, it's never crossed his mind to think about men loving men, women loving women. This whole book is very queer. He's actually completely surrounded by queer characters, and he has no concept of it. And he's one of those characters who, as he goes along, he's learning slowly, and sometimes you get really frustrated with him, but he is learning, and he is quite accepting when he allows himself time to actually think about it. Hi guys, editing Steph here. Thank you for putting up with my rambling while recovering from my booster. But the one thing that I really forgot to mention that is very, very important in this book about Valentin is that he is demisexual, and he doesn't actually realize that's a thing, because he is pursuing Belle because he believes it's his duty to marry, to produce an heir, to, you know, make good on his father's wishes, but he actually doesn't feel attraction, or hasn't felt attraction, to anyone at all in the past, which is why his connection with Bonnie is so important. So I forgot to mention that. It is very, very important, and it was really so well done in this book. And as it so happens, he and Bonnie begin to fall in love, and they're still trying to track down his sister, and Valentin constantly stuffs things up and says the wrong thing, and Bonnie either has to try and help him, save him, or tell him off. But you can tell that there is a genuine affection for each other between these two characters. Belle as a character annoyed me a little bit. I totally understand her point of view. I totally understand why she's doing what she's doing, and why she wants her own agency, and why she doesn't want a man telling her what is going to happen. But at the same time, there are a few things that she does. She is incredibly dramatic. Yeah, some of the things that she does, I think, are quite questionable in terms of the way that she antagonizes and actually makes a situation worse, which in turn causes Valentin to make situations worse as well. So I mean, I loved the book. It was so funny and so enjoyable, and I loved the characters. I just wish Belle hadn't grated on my nerves as much. So those are the books that I read this week, and I really thoroughly enjoyed myself, and I'm suddenly realizing that perhaps filming this video today was not the best. So if I was incoherent at any point, I apologise. I'm going to probably have a nap after filming this. I had a great reading week. This coming week when this video goes up is my first week back at school, so I'm not quite sure how much reading I'm going to get done. I'm definitely going to try because I'm going to need something to send to myself after the first week, because first week is always crazy. In the comments below, I would love to know what you have read throughout the week, or if you've read any of the books that I have, feel free to talk about your thoughts about them in the comments below. Or if you want to let me know that you're here but you don't want to leave a comment, feel free to leave a unicorn emoji, because not only did I read Aquicorn Cove, but Bonnie is described in the book as being an absolute queer unicorn and a delight. He is honestly probably one of the most delightful characters I've read in ages. So unicorns for Bonnie down below. I hope that wherever you're in the world, you're staying safe and healthy, and I'll see you in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye everyone.